All right, welcome back everyone to another Season 18 PGL interview. Today we are here with the Season 6 PGL champion, going way back, not quite as far as Pro Fail, but going way, way back in the years. The DLNL World Championship top four. Not quite the champion, but close. And recent BBL Arceus champion, piloting an absolutely terrifying Bastia Legion team, because that's partially what inspired me to actually take it this season. Hawhatos, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. How are you?
Good, good. I'm doing fantastic. I'm bobbing. It's Friday, breaking the fourth wall, so we're having a good day today.
Mhm.
Yeah, so happy to have you here. Happy to talk about your team. I've got some fun questions planned. I love looking at this team. It makes me happy. I can't tell you what about this team makes me so happy, but something about it really appeals to me. So
It was
yeah,
it was a bit of a vibes draft. I will
I,
I will say that.
I totally agree. Maybe it's because in another league I've been using Cobalion recently, but we'll get into it with your team. Hear your thoughts on it. So first question, kind of what was your thoughts going in? Yeah, I know the draft, as I've said many, many times at this point, it is low tier, even lower tier for Terra captains. You've got the cup moves other than Pursuit and Hidden Power, and the budget was pretty tight. So keeping those things in mind, you were dead center in the draft. You were pick number 8. Did you get the round 1 you wanted, or did you get sniped? And when it got back to you, did you get the round 2 you wanted? And then past that, kind of give me a little reasoning why you picked the Cobalion into the Mandibuzz.
Yeah, so there were a few picks on this board that I think were probably too good to pass up if they got to me.
Hmm.
I think the Mega Aggron, Axorus, probably the Ogerpon as well. But nothing I was really in love with outside of those that I just thought would have been too good to pass up. Obviously, none of those made it to me at, like you said, smack dab in the middle.
Hmm.
So after that, the Cobalion was just the Pokemon that appealed most on the board. I really like the flexibility it has. It gets you a good steel typing, even though it might be missing a couple of those resistances. We'll
Yep.
talk a little bit about that. But it just, it's got good mixed offenses, a great speed tier. It's got stealth rocks, full switch. Like, it's just got a great toolkit.
Mhm.
And I love consistency, flexibility, and also bulk. You will never see me draft a top pick that is not bulky in some way.
Mhm.
And obviously, the Mandibuzz also very bulky pick, a lot of defensive utility. It's a great slow pivot, but it also has a good speed tier for low tier.
Mhm.
That was always kind of my intended second pick. It's one of my favorite ones to use, and I haven't had a chance to use it yet this generation.
Oh wow.
So I thought low tier would be a great chance for that. So I pretty much got what I was hoping for. So I'm pretty pleased with my top two.
Hmm. Nice. Yeah, I could see why. Like, I love the Cobalion pick. Like I said, I use it, and the just amount of ways it has to set up is kind of crazy. Like, for any given matchup, you could run Sword Stance, Calm Mind, Iron Defense, Body Press. Maybe it gets some kind of speed boosting as well. Maybe it gets agility, but not that it really needs it in low tier. But it has a plethora of options. Obviously, a defensive mon as well on that physical side. You've got the Mandibuzz, covers both sides really well, so I'd love to see that. Knocks out your dark type nice and early. And it's not really a pushover offensively itself. Obviously, those stats aren't great, but just having bird stab and dark moves like foul play really covers for that. So I'm a big fan of those picks. And that kind of gets us into some of your later picks. So the Cyclozar, one of my favorite low tiers of all time, I got to tell you. And so I think it fits really well on the team. You've also got, we'll kind of work around the Terra Captains right now. So you tell me a little bit about the
Yeah.
Cyclozar, and then maybe some of those other later picks you got, and maybe the Seismitoad, Arbok, Meganium.
Yeah, so cyclists are one. I think it's on a board that is full of very expensive picks. I think it's incredible value. It
Hmm.
knocks out an elite speed tier. You get knock, U-turn, spin. As I know you're a big proponent of offensive cyclists are as well. So it's not a
Yes.
slouch there. It may not have the best stats, but with that speed tier,
Mhm.
and high powered moves, it's got double edge, it's got Draco Meteor, it's
Yep.
got a variety of coverage. Again, it kind of fits with this theme of consistency as a region pivot, and
Hmm.
just a lot of flexibility. So I wanted that. I also think it does really well with Mandibuzz because Mandibuzz does better the fewer times it has to run defog.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to get a solid spinner to pair with it. So Mandibuzz has more options to fit things like, taunt, extra dark moves, U-turn, Brave Bird, all those things that it would love to run
Hmm.
that defog gets in the way of sometimes.
Yep.
Um, the other thing I'll skip a little bit actually to the end because I think it's
Sure.
important.
Yep.
I picked Reuniclus last, which I think is a really interesting thing the way the draft worked.
Yep.
I love a fighting dark psychic offensive core, and I know that's a weird word to use for this team because it is very bulky.
Yep.
But there were a ton of psychics on the board, and so I knew from round 3 that I was going to want a really good one and preferably an offensive one.
Hmm.
Um, so I did. That's part of why I drafted, Terra Captains a little early and saved up some budget. The longer draft went on, the more Reuniclus just was the obvious pick. It complements the bulk. It gives me some good breaking power. Gives me a scary setup threat, and I think just really pairs well with my top 2 picks.
Hmm.
Um, so it was interesting. There were a lot of psychics, and I'll talk about some of the other ones that went undrafted
Yep.
that I think are really good. But it was nice to be able to save that until the very end.
Hmm.
As far as kind of some of those middle picks, the Seismitoad, the Arbok, the Meganium, that really just as the draft went on, I had roles and types I wanted to fill. I wanted a ground that got rocks. I wanted a good water type. I wanted a cleric grass, and really those just fell into place. The
Yes.
longer things went on, with Seismitoad, there weren't really any cheaper waters or grounds I wanted.
Hmm.
I would have been okay with either Seismitoad or Gastrodon. I ended up going with a slightly cheaper option.
Hmm.
But yeah, that really just, they fill the roles that I need. They give me those strong toolkits with you know, lots of those standard kind of type-based moves that you want to have.
Yep.
I also like having a water immunity on this board. I think everyone drafted some kind of scary water type.
Yep.
Um, so that's part of what prevented me from going for something like Whiscash as a cheaper budget water ground.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I really like the thinking here because you can clearly see in your draft, like the first 3 Mons are, I would call, relatively irreplaceable. Like you're not going to get
Mhm.
a bulky dark hardly anywhere else with the tools that Mandibuzz has. You're not going to get a over 120 base speed spinner that does as much as Cyclozar does. But then,
Exactly.
like, some of your pivotal pieces are at the end of your draft, like the Reuniclus, like the Seismitoad, but you had options there. Seismitoad, you had Gastro as a backup. Meganium, obviously, you can flex that slot a little bit, but you ended up going with the best thing for you that was left, which was
Mhm.
better than locking in like Reuniclus round 3 and then Cyclozar goes and you can't fill that slot. So I really like your drafting mentality there.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of saving budget for one last big pick, and then just kind of flexing based on which option, what has the most options remaining that I can save till the end, be relatively safe.
Exactly. It's kind of like picking with kind of like picking with negative points, if that makes sense. Like instead of
Mhm.
picking your low tiers based on the few points you have left, you're looking at the last big spend you have coming up and you think on the points you have, like to pick everything to fill around it essentially that's gonna potentially go where Reuniclus was relatively safe at this point in the draft. No one was probably gonna take it at this point.
Exactly, especially on. I love these PGL boards where it's a big draft board. There's a lot of stuff out there, but the budget's pretty tight.
Yes.
There's going to be a ton of high tiers left
Hmm.
towards the end. So yeah, you can kind of play around what people are leaving up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can you can hope that after like 3 or 4 rounds that everything at the top is probably relatively safe. I know there was quite a few people this season, and quite often in seasons that did wait to pick up a big ticket
Mhm.
item for the last round, but luckily none of you overlapped on what you wanted, it seems, so that worked out.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, well, that leaves us with 3 very specific Pokemon to talk about before we get into kind of the overall. And that would be your Terra Captains. Now, Magmar, super cool. I'll let you talk more on it, but just the amount of things it can do being an old Gen 1 Pokemon is really neat. And obviously we gotta discuss the round 5 Sudowoodo. That is so iconic for you. I feel like if I see a Sudowoodo on a draft, there's over a 50% chance it's a team you've made. And then of course the Plusle as well.
Absolutely. So I think Magmar is interesting because that round 4 Magmar, super early. I don't think you'll find many people who would necessarily agree with that. The main thing is I really needed a fairy resist at this point, given that my steel does not resist fairy, and I had, 2 other weaknesses. So I really wanted a fire or poison type to get that resistance. Poison, I think, is much more widespread on the board. I'm honestly just not a huge fan of most of the fire types on this board. So I was looking. I also wanted to start getting Terra Captains early, make sure I got ones that give me the sort of flexibility that I want and that can do something cool. Magmar just stood out as it's a cheap option. I've used it before in low tier. It's really fun. I love that it's a fire type that naturally has at least a couple of poison moves to hit fairies back. I think that gets into the kind of interesting subject that you and Cham talked about a couple days ago, where it doesn't necessarily do you much good if you have a resistance to a typing if you switch in and you can't do anything back.
Yes.
So I love that Magmar has a couple of those poison moves without requiring using something like Terra Blast to hit those fairies. Like you said, it's a Gen 1 Pokemon. It has some funny coverage. It's got things like Teleport because we're doing Nat Dex. It has Belly Drum with Mach Punch and Terra that's kind of cool. So I like that it gives me a lot of options, and it was cheap, and really I just didn't like any of the other fires that were going to fit my budget.
That's fair.
On the other hand, Sudowoodo, I don't have a ton to say other than I wanted to put off some of my other picks, and I really love using it. I haven't gotten to use it as a Terra Captain yet, so that was something I knew going into the draft I was probably going to be picking it. I do think it has a really unique set of tools on this board. Gives me a sturdy emergency check to a lot of the really scary stuff. It can Terra either defensively or offensively. Something like grass can do both, but it can do fairy, steel, water, poison for defenses. Offensively, again, the grass, it can go rock. A lot of these teams don't have the best or most bulky rock resist, so I'm sure there will be at least one game I can run Terra Rock, Choice Band, Head Smash.
Please
so
do.
I think it's going to be fun. I don't necessarily think it's the best option, but it was something that I was going to pick regardless of how the draft was going. So I locked it in early to give myself time to figure out the other pieces. And then lastly, the Plusle. I had 3 points left for my last Terra Captain. It's got a nice speed tier to pair with Magmar to hopefully put some pressure in that speed range that otherwise might be easily ignored. It's got some baseline coverage that it can use. It has, obviously Terra Blast to get extra coverage. I don't expect it to come very often, but it's nice to have and better than most of the other 3-point options.
That's so true, honestly. The 3-point tier was so abysmal that I think Plusle is actually like quite a lot of value for the price. The other two, I need to see at least one Belly Drum Magmar sweep or attempted a sweep this season. I think that would be so hype.
I'm gonna try my best to bring it. I can't promise success quite yet, but agreed. I think it'll be a lot of fun to try.
Yeah, I hope so. If not, that's okay. But it's definitely a cool option and something that forces some amount of prep, because if you just run Belly Drum, Mach Punch, or Flame Charge, right? Belly Drum, Flame Charge, and then you're off to the races, outrunning everything. So yeah, I love it. I think this team's sick. There is something I want to point out as we're getting into kind of how do you like your team overall. So normal question. Do you like how your team turned out? Was this like, I know it's partially a plan, making sure that you filled all the pieces with the appropriate budget, but also this is a super interesting draft because up until Reuniclus, you didn't have any Pokemon with over base 100 attack or base 100 special attack. So without a lot of that immediate power, of course there is immediate power in just base moves and items with things like Cyclozar. Was your plan, as the team went on and you started seeing, you were getting more and more pieces like this, Was the plan like you're gonna run more setup or you're gonna run more damage boosting? Like what was the idea behind like going
Yeah.
into an average game? Yeah.
And you know full well, I briefly considered committing to that hard and finding my last psychic piece to be something that didn't break that 100. I of course decided that was probably a bad idea. So it wasn't really
Yeah.
intentional. It was something that sort of just happened throughout the draft. I noticed, hey, I'm not drafting anything with huge base stats. The two main things I say, I've mentioned that a lot of my stuff has multiple setup options or coverage or just high base power moves. I think that's going to help a lot. I've got a few things that could run something like choice items or a life orb really well.
Hmm.
I also just think I have a lot of ways to wear teams down.
Yes.
If you look at how many things on my team have taunt to stop recovery,
Oh.
it's a lot.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
also, things like I think Reuniclus does a fantastic job of this. It's probably going to come to every game. I don't think that's a shock to say.
Hmm.
And it has things like Future Sight, which pairs really well, especially with Cobalion, to come in on dark types
Hmm.
and potentially get a justified boost or just threaten them with close combat. But it also has things like Psychic Noise.
Hmm.
So I have ways of wearing teams down. I have decent hazard setting. But you're right. I don't have that much immediate power. I am going to rely on a lot of items and picking good coverage to do that. I think
Hmm.
it's going to be an interesting challenge, not having a single button clicker. But I'm very happy with how the team worked out. I think it's going to be really fun to prep with, and I do think it has a lot more tools than it may initially appear. I don't think it's passive, despite having low relative offensive stats.
Yeah, absolutely not passive. And you have pieces like, if you're playing in a war of attrition, you have like things like T spikes on Arbok to pair with
Mhm.
your regenerator core to pair with Manibuzz, who's one of the most annoyingly bulky Pokemon there is. And then, if you really wanted, if you were really desperate for that self sustain, you've got that wish passing plusle, with the base 60 HP. So, always something.
Yeah, yeah. So I think I've got some options, and I think the team can flex in a few different ways. So I'm hoping it's not going to be easy to prep for.
I don't think it is. Just looking at it at base, I think it's a little bit of a nightmare because you know that you're gonna try to break a team somehow, whether it's the slow game or the long game. But it can be really hard to try to account for both of those with all the limited tools that other people have, it being low tier.
Yeah, and I think we play next week, so hopefully you'll say afterwards that it was easy.
Oh my gosh, don't remind me. I'm playing the whole kitchen this season. A cham into you immediately means I just can never throw my team matchup up in the group chat and just be like, make the team for me real quick because I'm lazy.
I mean, I'll make the team for our game if you want.
Okay, sure. I feel like that's gonna include a Tentacool and a Dedenne, but just a hunch.
Hmm.
Nice. Yeah, so that's a really good segue. Looking at the other teams, there's 16 other teams or 15 other teams on the board, not counting yours. Are there ones that stand out to you as really powerful? Any that really excite you to play against this season if you looked at your schedule, or ones that are pretty scary, I would say?
So I'm in the midst of prepping to play Eltris week one. We have played many times. I think I usually match up pretty well into him, but his team this season is scaring me a lot. That
Mm,
Sylveon, Passimian, Mudsdale combo is a huge pain for my team. And
mhm.
unlike mine, he has a lot more immediate offensive presence. So that one it's a fun game to prep for right now. I think he's got a great team, and I love the call them the more gimmicky options. I've mentioned those in Discord a couple
Mhm.
times with like
Yep.
the Zoroark disguise. He's got the Ice Cube, obviously.
Yep.
Even stuff like Shell Smash on Turtonator, Serene Face Sawsbuck. So I think he's got a lot of really annoying options combined with a top 4 or 5 that are just incredibly consistent.
Yes.
The other one I'll mention, this is I believe I play in week 7. I think Enoler's going to have a really tough team to deal with
Hmm.
the Sandy Shocks and the Star Raptor.
Yep.
I also, I lost to him in finals last season in Little Cup, so I've got a bit of a chip from that matchup. So
Yeah.
I think finishing my regular season playing him, I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, that's kind of poetic in a way, you know.
Hmm.
It takes away your crown last season, and you have to play him last game of regular season. Who knows how the regular season goes? Maybe that week 7 game is you two fighting for a final playoff slot or
Yeah.
something. Probably not because you're both so accomplished, but you never know. So really excited to see that. Yeah, and I think both those teams definitely both have been mentioned several times at this point. They are horrifying to try to even consider prepping for. Like Eltras's bulk alone just terrifies me. Like to make sure that, and I've gotten cooked by Passimian multiple times when I assume it's gonna be scarfed, and it either subs or bulk ups in my face, and it's a bad time. That Pokemon is way better than it has any right of being.
I feel like Passimian and Sylveon are almost equivalent in their respective spaces where they can run choice items, they can run bulky setup, they can just be bulky and annoying without setting up.
Hmm.
And trying to figure out what each of them is going to do, I think it's going to be a huge challenge for people.
I honestly, you could probably say that about pretty much his entire top 5. Obviously, Mudstale's not doing a whole lot of manual setup, but Turtonator and Rotom Wash also, you like Shell Smash,
Hmm.
Nasty Plot, or they could just be obnoxiously bulky, and you deal with those in different ways. So yeah, have fun with that. I hope that goes well this week.
Thank you. I'm going to need some luck for that one.
Yeah, maybe. Hopefully not. Hopefully it's a good battle. But after looking at those teams, we've got the draft board. A lot of things went, a lot more things didn't, especially in tiers like 18 and 16. So is there anything on this draft board that stands out to you that no one took and it's surprising? Maybe you alluded earlier to maybe a psychic or two that should have went, but is still hanging out on the board ready to go.
Yeah, so I had my kind of draft spreadsheet that I was using to keep track of things. I had a whole list of psychics that I was interested in,
Hmm.
that narrowed down as the draft went on. A couple of the big ones that are left over. Um, in 18, we've got Celebi and Monkey Dory. I think both of those are great. Monkey Dory, especially, I thought was really scary as a psychic that can pivot out of dark types and just has a cool move pool. I also think Delphox was another psychic that was probably the only other fire type as well that I was particularly interested in, other than Magmar. I think Delphox 16 is great value on this board. It's got a good speed tier, tons of coverage, tons of utility options. So I think those are the main psychics. The last one I'll mention is Hoopa in 14. That was actually my leading choice for a lot of the draft. Um, I think it's a lot of power for a relatively good price on this board.
Yep.
And again, a lot of teams may not have the staying power to consistently, switch into it. A lot of darks that are, may not have good recovery or good, super good bulk.
Hmm. Yeah, I think you got one of the only darks with good bulk and recovery. So
Hmm.
you definitely setting yourself up well there. And I would say Delphox. I didn't even think about it this draft really, but that's a huge that's a channel MVP. I've used it so many times and I love it. It does so well in like high tier that I couldn't imagine it in this format. I'm actually kind of shocked that it's still on the board. So that's a really good call out.
Yeah, I also think there's just a lot of speedy picks that surprised me that they didn't get taken. Speed was hard to come by on this board. And if we see, a lot of the birds that went undrafted, Kilowattrel, Talonflame, even Aerodactyl, Tornadus,
Mm-hmm.
I'm surprised to see a lot of those, didn't get taken. I know budget was an issue and, there's a lot of flying types out there, but I think if anyone feels like they need more speed, there's a lot of cool high tier options that are left over.
Absolutely. Those birds are pivotal to a lot of teams you'll see in like official tournaments like Smogon. Like you'll see Talonflame just everywhere, Kilowattrel as well. So yeah, that's a really strong call out. And you would think Cyclozar, obviously it is very fast, but a lot of times people do try to grab a 130. But I feel like this draft is slower in general. Like people didn't value the speed as much as they have in
Mhm.
past seasons. So I think that Cyclozar might be in like top 15, if not top 10 fastest mons that were drafted currently this season.
Yeah, I think we got a lot of people who got somewhere in the maybe 115 range is the top. So it
Hmm.
does feel nice having something that can be the fastest on the field if it wants to be.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's really good at that. So yeah, excited to see it. Excited to see you play this season. That does kind of bring us to the end of the interview. It was great. I will ask one final question though, and that is, do you have any final statements, thoughts, comments for your fellow coaches and for the viewers and for anybody else out there?
Honestly, I just think this draft board, was super cool. I had a really great time trying to put a team together. I think everyone put together a lot of really fun teams, and I really can't wait to see more games. I know at this point we've seen the first, I think, one or two games played.
Hmm.
So I'm really looking forward to the weekend when we start getting to see more, and I'm just excited to watch everyone this season.
Same, yeah, I've been loving it so far. I've never clicked on replay links so fast. Like I'm so hyped. Problem
Mhm.
with doing these interviews though is I'm kind of rooting for everyone at this point. I've talked to almost everyone on the list. So I see people win and I'm like, "Yeah, good job, dude." And then I see the person lose and I'm like, "No." So it's going to be a hard season for me, I think, just watching other people like if somebody wins, somebody else has got to lose and there's a lot of strong competitors here. So I'm excited to see how the season goes.
I and we all really appreciate you doing these interviews. I think it's been fascinating to get more insight than you normally would into everyone's drafting process and why they did what they did, and kind of the unique takes on their teams that may not have been obvious. I think it's been a really fascinating approach to it. So
I
thank you.
Yeah, of course. I'm happy to. I love how many perspectives I've gotten through doing this, like different people. Like obviously I have a decent idea of how you, Cham, and J Scurf draft, and we've all covered that pretty well. You know, we all have our own kind of methods to the madness. But hearing everybody else's, like the newcomers, the other people in the PGL that, you know, have been around for a minute, it's really, really, really cool seeing everybody's unique insight into how they do the things they do. So yeah, it's been great. I'm glad I've been doing it. I'm happy to keep doing it. Maybe I'll come back season 19 in a year or so.
Hmm.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for being here. Really appreciate you. And for those watching at home, we will see you again next time.